I'd love to know what percentage of royalties Tom Clancy gets whenever someone uses his name in a video game. Well, his bank account is about to take another steep incline as we get the release of Rainbow Six Siege. Developed by Ubisoft Montreal for the PS4, Xbox One, and of course Microsoft Windows. It's been an open and closed beta for the last couple months, but now it's planted a breach charge on our living room walls and blasted its way into our lives.
Op 4 eliminated all friendlies.
Now, Rainbow Six Siege has nothing to spoil in terms of the story because it practically has no story to begin with. The long and short of it is there's a terrorist organization that wear white masks that are going around doing bad things. You play alongside 4 other people against the AI in various different game modes or against other players online. I took a look at this game during the closed beta, during which time there were a few issues with the game. Obviously, it was a bit bare bones on content, the AI wasn't all that consistent, and there weren't many operators to play around with. Well, now they've released the full game, and now there's about half a dozen or so maps spread across all the various game modes. The AI is surprisingly challenging and genuinely difficult at times. They don't stand around staring at ceilings or stuck in doorways quite as much as they used to, and will actively rush your position, destroy whatever's in their way to get to you, or fire at you through destructible walls. They're quite adept at throwing flashbangs or other grenades, and overall they're just much more intelligent. The difficulty modes largely seems to affect their accuracy and the damage you take more than their base intelligence, and from what I've seen there's very little difference in their behaviour between these difficulty modes. Suicide bombers make a return as well, though their range is a lot smaller, meaning they're not as annoying to deal with. And lastly, of course, we now have 20 operators to play around with. During matches you're earning both experience and something called renown, which is like a form of in-game currency. Experience is limited to leveling up, but renown is used for buying new operators, upgrading weapons, and also unlocking skins for these weapons as well. Even if you fail a mission, you still get a good chunk of experience and renown points. One thing I'm not happy about is that Rainbow Six Siege uses microtransactions for weapon skins and other unlockables using another kind of currency called Rainbow Six credits, which can cost you in the range of $15 to $80 to purchase. They're not mandatory though, and most of them are purely cosmetic. All of the operators can still be unlocked without having to pay anything extra, for the time being anyway. It's just that for those willing to fork out a bit of extra cash, they can get a little more extra content than the rest of us. Now, I still don't really think there's any particular operator that's more effective than another. What they're basically broken down into is their armor and speed rating and what type of weapons they can gain access to. They do have their own unique gadgets and stats, making them feel like classes in a sense, but I just didn't find myself using these all that much. Lacking another operator's gadgets doesn't mean you're going to be unable to do something, it just means you need to find an alternative. Seeing as this is a somewhat difficult shooting game in the sense that you can die from a handful of bullets, it seems kind of counterproductive to not choose the operators with the most armor, especially on hard or realistic mode where you're killed very quickly. That's not to say that light armored operators are no fun, it's just that the combat can be a bit more lenient with the tougher operators, and you're less likely to get knocked on your ass. Something that's carried across from the beta was just how sloppy the operator selection can be at times. Getting the operator you want comes down to how quickly other players select them at the beginning of a match, and if the one you're after gets taken by someone else, then it can be a bit irritating. Another thing that's carried across from the beta to the full version is the presentation, which is superb. It runs almost maxed out with practically no frame rate drops, and the visuals menu is extensive on the things you can scale back. Despite all the shit that Ubisoft often get for their lackluster PC ports, this isn't one of them. Weapons are modelled nicely, the character models are detailed, and all of the operators are quite unique in appearance and design, but where the presentation really excels is during gunfights. Those moments when everyone is shooting at someone and there's explosions and shouting, it's just awesome stuff. During the missions set in smaller buildings, it's common to see walls and floors with large holes from breach charges and gunfire, and this sort of disregard for restraint in the way you can destroy the environment makes for some truly enjoyable gameplay. In terms of the gameplay, the game is split up mostly into those two modes, Terrorist Hunt and Standard Team Deathmatch. There's also an offline component where you can run through tutorial missions, what the game calls situations. These are more to get you used to the mechanics of the game more than anything else, though they are useful at earning experience points before hopping into the main game modes. Terrorist Hunt, I would think, is where most people are going to spend their time. This is where you're either just killing every single bad guy in a level, rescuing a hostage, defending a hostage, or disarming a bomb. The disarm bomb mode is probably my favourite out of all these modes. In this mode, you're searching for 2 bombs in the area which need to be defused with a special kit, While they're being defused, you're getting bombarded from every single direction as enemies flood your positions. Walls are exploding, guys are storming through doors and windows. It's just this full-on relentless assault, and it's totally kick-ass. Protecting the hostage is a similar style of gameplay where you can reinforce walls and set up traps to hold off the waves of terrorists that assault your position. It's not that Team Deathmatch is bad, but it's just a lot slower, and it really does sort of necessitate camping. Matches take a lot longer, and seeing as the whole point of the game is to level up and earn renown points, it seems a bit redundant to me to spend too much time in this mode unless you're really into it. So by now you're probably wondering what's wrong with this game. Well, that's a good question, Sonny Jim. For starters, latency issues are quite common. I don't think I ever had a server that was below 200 ping the entire time, and I had a few dropouts and other connection errors as well. As fun as bomb disarm mode is, it's also a little bit unbalanced at the moment. As soon as you find one of the bombs, terrorists just start spawning in constantly, and it can be unfairly difficult. Also, though the game has customization for all the weapons, literally every single weapon uses the same attachments, not really making them all that much unique. Lastly, I guess it's also a shame that the game doesn't have a proper dedicated single player mode. In fact, I think it's probably one of the only games in the series to not have this. Ultimately, the enjoyment factor depends quite a lot on the people you play with. If you're with some moron who runs off by himself and gets killed, it's obviously going to affect the way you perform as well. Most of the community seems to be pretty switched on. I mean, I rarely got on a server where everyone was just running off doing their own thing, and most people had the common sense to stick together. I think there's a precedence among gamers these days that if something isn't a 10 out of 10, then it's absolute garbage. Look at the user ratings for certain games on Metacritic and you'll see what I mean. Rainbow Six Siege is one of those games to me. It isn't a 10 out of 10, but I would never say it's a bad game either. It's enjoyable to play, it's challenging, it looks good, it sounds good, and it's addicting if you want it to be. It is polished and it is easy to pick up and play, it's just not the tactical shooter that old school Rainbow Six fans might have been looking for, and it's about as subtle as a bull in a china shop.
Be advised, Op 4 has visual on the hostage. Hostiles eliminated.
It's true though that there really isn't all that much to see and do here. And at that point where you get sick of shooting the same looking terrorists for the bazillionth time, or the luster of blowing up drywall gets old, is when the game is going to wear out its welcome. Until that point though, there's a good time to be had.